Hi guys, thanks for tuning in to another episode of Nuggets News. Today we welcome one of the main developers from the Raiden Network, and that's Lefteris. How are you today?
I'm fine, thanks. Good to
Thank,
be here.
yeah, I think we're on opposite times of the world, so thanks for organising this. But for those that haven't followed your work or Raiden, how did you get into crypto and specifically into Ethereum?
Yeah, that's a long story. I I joined Ethereum in 2014. I started working for the Ethereum Foundation. Uh, yeah, it sounded like an interesting project at the time. They had just finished um, the sale, and I worked as a C++ developer for the C++ Ethereum client and worked on the Solidity compiler.
Yeah.
Uh, yeah, and after that, I joined Slockit for a small amount of time, and then the DAO happened. And then after the DAO,
Yeah. Yeah.
after the DAO, I joined the Raiden Network team, and yeah, been there ever since.
We've interviewed Stefan Tuel on the channel, and I remember fondly the DAO attack, or maybe not so fondly, but it's crazy how time flies. So, why did you always have that layer two in mind as being really important, or what led you to that?
Layer two? Yeah. Well, I mean, having used Ethereum, like, okay, being a developer is one thing, but then when you start to use the Ethereum network, or I guess any cryptocurrency network, you start to realize that, yeah, this thing just won't really scale if we want Visa scale transactions and we want everybody like my mother or my grandma or whatever to participate. Then a solution is needed, and I had read the Lightning paper, and essentially that's where Lightning was inspired, and we needed a solution.
Yeah. So you said that you weren't a believer in being able to scale without that. So, I mean, how has that changed, and how is the layer one, the sharding, versus the layer two for you? How do they still stack up? Is layer two where we're going to get far more scaling from, and layer one is just going to be those little increments?
Yeah, pretty much. So for layer one versus layer two scaling, so there was this nice blog post by Vitalik. When was it? Like I think 2018, like August.
Yeah.
And it's like it basically suggests that, and I like the idea that okay, in the beginning, layer one can innovate a lot and make many changes, but then as time flies, and any project, any layer one project matures, um, you start to have the problem that any changes that you introduce in layer one may become controversial, and then you have governance problems, and at some point maybe it will not be possible to change fast enough,
Yeah.
and that's why you have layer two where you don't need to worry about this stuff.
Yeah. And I think a lot of people don't realize how hard it is to get a hard fork through, and versus that soft fork backwards compatible. Would you agree with that?
Yeah, definitely.
Particularly on Bitcoin,
we
we've
we
seen a lot
haven't
of
s-
controversy.
Yeah, and we haven't seen that controversy that much. I mean, it started in Ethereum too, but it can get a lot worse to the point that we may not be able to get hard forks through.
Yeah, and I actually have a theory that Barry Silbert and a few of the vested interests behind Ethereum Classic are really going to start to make a song and dance in that move to proof of stake, and that's going to be a bit of a battleground for a time being. Do you have any thoughts on that, or you want to avoid that topic?
I'd rather avoid it. I like to remain neutral on that stuff.
Fair enough, fair enough. So, for people at home, how does Raiden work, and what are some of the subtle differences from the Lightning Network on Bitcoin?
Yeah, so they are very similar. So the idea is essentially the same. Payment channels. So like Bitcoin has payment channels with Lightning, we have payment channels with Ethereum. So in short, let's say that you and I want to participate in a channel off chain. We first have to create an on-chain representative of our agreement. So this is the on-chain channel.
Yeah.
This happens in the Ethereum chain. We both or only one of us makes a deposit on chain, and from that point and on, we can make as many transactions as we want, completely off chain, up to the amount of that deposit.
Yeah.
So this is the very simple version of what a payment channel is. Then the very interesting thing starts when you have a network of payment channels. So, like, let's say Vitalik comes into the network, and then I want to send to Vitalik, but I don't have a channel with him. If you have a channel with him, then the Raiden network will find this out and route my payment through you.
And do Bitcoin and Ethereum have very different theories on routing at this stage, or is that still very similar what they're both aiming to do?
You mean the Raiden and Lightning, right?
Yes.
Yeah. We have some kind of not controversial, like unique plans, let's say, about routing right now. We want to go with third-party services for routing. This is something that our next milestone will start to introduce. At the moment, our current release on the mainnet is rather very simple. Each node has a global view of the blockchain, because you can see which channels exist and how much deposit they have. So you just try to guess what path would exist and try to route through it. If it doesn't work, then you backtrack and try again, and until it either succeeds or fails.
Yeah. Is this Raiden, the unidirectional movement? Is that what you're describing, or is that different? The current iteration of Raiden?
No, this is Raiden itself.
Okay, cool. So where is that up to on the mainnet versus what you're doing on the testnet?
So on the mainnet is exactly what I described. So this kind of routing. But essentially, this has a big problem, because transactions may fail. Because let's say that someone sees that we have a channel on chain, and I have deposited 5 Ether, and that's all they see. They have no idea about what me and I have actually done. Maybe I have spent all of my 5 Ether, and actually you have it, and someone will assume that because they see it on chain, there is 5 Ether, I have capacity to route through you, but that's not true, because in reality, off chain, I have already spent all of this.
Yeah.
So this is the big problem with routing, having a knowledge of the actual capacity of a channel, because on chain is not represented unless you actually close the channel.
Yeah. So with Lightning, we've just had, I'm not sure if you've seen in Australia, Wallet of Satoshi and Beam Wallet, which are now very user-friendly. They're custodial wallets to just generate an invoice. And we have a lot of people, beginners, that are now using the Lightning Network. So what stage is Raiden at, and what are those milestones that you're aiming for?
So at the moment, we are not, so UX is not our priority. We still want to get out and we call it the production ready proof of concept of the network, because what we have on the mainnet right now is an alpha version.
Yes.
So as I described, so this is the routing problem is just one of them. Then there is the monitoring problem. So there are some problems that need to be solved. UX is not so much of a priority right now. Once we have a stable and production ready version, then we will go for, so we want to improve. We also have a light client that we want to work on. Yeah. Things have to go slowly.
Ideally, when would you like the better UX and the first user-friendly wallets to be out? Do you think that's a realistic time frame in a year or 2 years?
Time frames. that's a very tricky question.
Not Ethereum's main thing, time frames, is it?
Time frames are not easy because things tend to let's say that when you put an estimation on something,
yes,
and you don't hit that milestone, then people start shouting at you. So I would like to avoid
Would you?
giving any time
I'll
frames.
phrase it this way instead. Would you agree that Bitcoin surprised a lot of people, having no mainnet, a bit over a year ago, and here we are, the capacity grew by 100-fold, and we have beginners using Lightning Network just a year later in Bitcoin. Did that surprise you how fast that developed?
Yeah, for me, it surprised me, and it really gave me a lot of hope for what we're building with Raiden. Because if you have seen them, the graph of Raiden is also growing right now, just like Lightning in the first days. Not as much maybe, but I'm actually even surprised how much people want to use an alpha version of something. So we have been rather careful. Like we put many warnings, like that. This is really a test version, like use it at your own risk, etc. But people still use that exactly like they used to the Lightning Network in the beginning, the reckless tag,
Yeah.
if you remember.
Yeah. For people at home that haven't been following all the scaling, what are your sort of goals and realistic transactions per second for that sharding versus Plasma? That's pretty scalable if we get that right, versus Raiden. And what's your ultimate goal, I guess?
Well, I don't have any numbers at hand right now, but I guess scaling can go up to like thousands of transactions per second eventually with a proper client.
Yeah.
We are not there yet because the client is still a POC. But in theory, it can, so as payment channels at least, can scale up to thousands, tens of thousands of transactions per second.
So easily getting to that Visa and MasterCard goal, which you sort of initially set out to get. Easily surpassing the Visa and MasterCard sort of transactions that you were talking about at the beginning of the interview.
That is the ultimate goal, I would say, right? To reach the same level and maybe surpass it. But when you start to see how the POC acts in the wild right now, you see that there are limits which we have to improve upon.
Yeah. And any final thoughts for people at home about the Ethereum ecosystem as a whole and how much that journey has changed from the early days to now? I guess, as you say, there's a lot of public scrutiny and people get pressured for timelines. And what do you want people at home to know about what's it like to be a developer working on Ethereum?
So Ethereum has really grown a lot, right? Like since the early days, there are so many things happening. I personally cannot follow all of them. Actually, I think that this is a good thing because then it means that the ecosystem is growing a lot, maybe a bit chaotically at times, but I believe that there is a lot of progress being made, and I think that good things will come as time passes. Like as for us, we have many goals for 2019 that we hope to hit, and like as I said before, like all of these third-party services. So a third-party service for pathfinding, for monitoring channels. So what Lightning calls watchtowers.
Yeah.
So we hope to hit those milestones inside this year.
Well, good luck with it all. We'll report on all that for you, and I do appreciate you joining us today because it is hard with the language barrier and talking about these really complicated topics and trying to describe them for beginners. So thanks so much for joining us today, mate.
Thank you.
Cheers, guys.